Greetings, my name is JC,
And I'm Ian.
and this is the Gamers Gaiden. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about first-person shooters and fighting games. But before we get into that, Ian, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a lot, JC.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would be sort of topical and that I did pick up on sale very recently is Reigns Game of Thrones edition.
Oh, cool. That's very
Yeah,
fitting that the
yeah,
game came out.
exactly. I guess they put it on sale because of that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's
What are you playing this on?
the Switch,
Oh, okay, cool.
and it's everything I love about Reigns,
Mm-hmm.
but with some added features. Mainly, you get to pick who sits on the Iron Throne.
Right.
You've got 9 unlockable characters. You start out with 1. You get
Oh,
the
okay.
second really quickly after,
Right.
and then it's all through completing little quests
Mm-hmm.
and like little dialogue trees that you unlock more and more people.
Oh, cool.
So it's really interesting. Each person kind of has a different hand and different like traits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it adds another layer, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
I've really been having fun with that. And the other thing, so I saw the trailer for Jedi Fallen Order,
Okay.
and it's done by Respawn.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you haven't seen the trailer, check out the trailer. I mean, it's just video, but whatever. I'm pumped. But it's made by Respawn, and I realized as I'm watching that, I'm like, oh man, I never finished Titanfall 2.
Right.
So I went back and finished Titanfall 2.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's
Like you were like halfway through the campaign, or did you start over again?
I was about halfway through the campaign.
Okay.
And like I kind of, well, not halfway through. I had kind of just gotten into the meat of it.
Sure.
So I really didn't miss much jumping in.
Right.
Kind of had a little bit of a recap and then took off, and man, I had a really good time with it.
Oh, okay, cool.
It was a lot more than I was expecting for a shooter,
Right.
for one.
And about how many hours was the campaign?
Oh,
Like
probably
10 to
around the
15?
you know what? Honestly, I would say probably around 8,
Oh, okay.
and that was pretty much perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if it was longer, it might have kind of droned on a little bit.
Overstayed its welcome.
Yeah, it was pretty good for what it was.
Right.
And beyond that, I played a little bit more of Ass Creed Rogue,
Right.
which it's still enjoyable.
Cool.
I played some 9 Parchments on the Switch
Oh, okay. What's that?
with my gaming buddy Rachel.
Oh, okay.
It's like a kind of gauntlet-y.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
You know, you've got
Gauntlet, as in like the classic Gauntlet, or more like Gauntlet Slayer Edition.
let's say classic Gauntlet because I haven't
Okay.
played Slayer Edition.
Oh, okay.
And I
They
might
are
be
very similar.
I might be totally off base with this Gauntlet thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like top down. Your wizards
Mm-hmm.
exclusively, so you can't take much damage.
Okay.
You do have a melee option, but each wizard has 3. You start with 3 spells
Okay.
in your like inventory, and you're throwing them out there. They have different. Each spell is different. There's I think want to say 4 different element types.
Oh, okay.
You've got ice, fire, lightning, and death,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also a healing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I guess 5.
Right.
And each of them has like a different delivery method. So you might have like a beam, a wave, like a bolt,
Right.
even like an orb that you can toss and like detonate, and it'll have like an area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it
Um,
looks very much like the modern Gauntlets or Magicka, if you've played that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of Magicka, because
Yeah.
it's actually Magic again. But it's a lot of fun. It's meant to be played multiplayer.
Cool.
You unlock different wizards as you're going, and different spells.
Mhm.
So each section will have a boss. Your boss will give you, like, when you kill the boss, you'll get one of the lost 9 parchments.
Oh, okay, cool. Is it roguelike, the Enter the Gungeon or something? Or
No,
Oh, okay.
the campaign is pretty static.
It's set? Okay.
So there are some unlockables, like there's chests in each level.
Mhm.
There's hidden brushes to collect.
Right.
But if you've collected them, it's not like they'll appear in there again. You can just like, you have to grab like your first time through grabbing them.
Yeah,
They
fair enough.
disappear after that. But it's been a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Stat upgrades. Like there is character progression.
Right.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. We probably put 6 hours in
Cool.
and didn't. We got a good way through the campaign, but didn't finish it.
Hmm.
I played a little bit on my own. It's not as fun by yourself.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more difficult. Like, is there a combo system as well?
Yeah, you can chain your spells.
Yeah.
So you combine the two to create something different. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. And then you have your enemies. Some of them are elemental based. Some will have like an element shield,
Right.
which you have to break down with a different element. It's
Cool.
fun. It's fun. And undead take damage from healing,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I love it when they put that in. Because
Yeah.
not everything does it, but it makes complete sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. It does make sense.
And I'm not going to keep everybody here and ramble on all day about the stuff that I've been playing. But I did want to mention that I picked up the Joker pack for Smash Ultimate.
Right.
And it's pretty cool.
Cool.
It's really cool. For the $7 price tag on it,
Mhm.
I was kind of a little like, nah.
But it's not just the character, right?
Well, no. It's the character, a new map,
Mm-hmm.
which has some interesting elements with like moving sides and a ceiling.
Okay.
So sometimes there's a ceiling, sometimes there's no ceiling, sometimes sides will slide in and out.
Right.
And then on top of that, you get, I want to say about 5 songs from Persona 5,
Oh, okay.
and then a couple from Persona 4 and a few from Persona 3.
Okay.
And depending on the song that's playing,
Mm-hmm.
will depend on the color scheme of the map.
Oh, okay.
So it'll adjust to, if it's like a Persona 3 song, it'll be the blues and the black,
Okay.
like the color scheme from Persona 3.
Like its menu and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's really neat. It's I hope they continue delivering to that level
Mm-hmm.
for each of the additional character packs. I would gladly pay $7 a pack if
Right.
they keep it at that level.
Cool.
So, JC, what have you been playing?
Well, I've been playing 3 different games. The Konami Anniversary Collection Arcade Classics, it's a mouthful, came out on last Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, you're super excited about that.
Yeah, and there's more of them coming, so that's pretty cool. There's
Yeah.
Contra and Castlevania. But I downloaded that and then on the Switch, and then played a bunch of content through each of the games while I was like watching some TV and stuff like that on the
Nice.
weekend. During the week, and managed to play through in completion Thundercross and Typhoon. And I think I'm going to try and do Thundercross with like limiting myself, so I only use a certain number of like coins
Okay.
to try and like, get better at
Is
the
that
game.
an option? Do you actually have to like pump in digital coins?
Well, you press the triangle button, X.
Okay.
X to insert a coin, and then it's just the other 3 buttons to because all the arcade games are 3-button games.
Okay.
And yeah, it was pretty good. The one complaint I would have, they look great and they look accurate, but on a couple of the games, one of them, I think Life Force, because I got about halfway through that game and then I put it down to go eat, and then also Thundercross, I noticed a lot of slowdown on certain
Oh.
areas.
Okay.
I don't ever recall playing any of these non-emulated, so I don't know whether or not it's just the emulator or if the arcade would have slowed down at the same time. But like I have a Neo Geo cabinet, and like I have Metal Slug for it, so I can compare that, and like there is next to like no slowdown in comparison. There is
Yeah.
slowdown, but like definitely a slowdown, but like in comparison to like a lot of the emulators, even on the Switch, there's no like about twice as much slowdown, I guess.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so I was a little concerned about, disappointed about that, but it didn't really affect the gameplay too much. But there's some patterns where, like, if you change the speed of things, it really screws you up. So that was kind of disappointing because of the bullet patterns and stuff like that that are coming towards you. So yeah, it's just something I got to get used to. I also this week Box Boy and Box Girl is coming out, and they
Yes.
released the demo of that last week as well. So it comes with 8 or 10 levels, and it really got me a good feel for what the game is going to be like, and it really basically was like an introductory world essentially.
Okay.
It's kind of like
That's not bad for a demo.
yeah, it was pretty good. It took like maybe a good like 20 minutes, 25 minutes or something like that to play through them. And it there's apparently different box people you can be in the full game and stuff,
Okay.
but like there's a rectangle dude,
Oh,
and then the smaller person and the normal ones, and I don't know if they have different abilities or not, but in the demo anyway, you're just the vanilla box boy, and then you can like duplicate yourself and then throw your extra boxes and stuff like that, and then there's switches and different switches work in different ways and stuff like that, and it was really really cool. It was so if you're interested and not sure about the game, I would definitely play the demo because that um, if the trailer didn't entice you, because that definitely gave me a really good feel for what the game is going to be like.
yeah.
And I'm glad that they did that because now I'm like, yeah, I know I really want to play it. Where the hell's the whole game? But
Soon, soon.
I'll probably play that next week whenever I'm away for work. But so I played through the demo. And the last game I played was more Beat Saber.
Ooh.
As I've been playing that constantly for the past like 2.5 weeks.
Have you gotten good yet?
Sure.
Okay.
So there is a couple of songs where I can play them on Expert Plus, but I can't complete them. But I can get like maybe like a third of the way or halfway through the song.
Oh, wow.
And then basically what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to basically like I can complete every song on Expert minus some of them on the DLC pack. And I'm basically playing those on slow speed to try and learn the patterns. So I just constantly bring them back up to try and like get further in them so I can relearn the patterns because the patterns on those are, in my opinion, a little bit more tricky.
Okay.
But I think once I get that, then I'll be able to play the game better. But I can complete them, but I'm not necessarily best at them on that level. So I'm just trying to get better at them to get like higher chain combos and a higher score and stuff like that. And then once that happens, I think I'll be able to like move forward and be able to maybe beat all the harder levels and stuff like that on expert at a bare minimum.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm playing more of that and probably will continue to play it. But that's the stuff that I've been playing. So
Nice.
yeah, I wanted to get back into Warcraft a little bit, but I just haven't had the time. But maybe this coming week. Yeah. So our first segment we're gonna do is fighting games.
Fighting games.
So in fighting games, I play more fighting games than you do, I think.
That's kind of the interesting thing about these segments is that
Yeah.
like the fighting games is a little bit more of your thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not a big fighting game
Yeah.
person, whereas the shooters are more something that I'm really familiar with, and that's not kind of your forte. So
Yeah.
you're gonna be listening to a lot of JC right now, and the odd like, oh my god, I played that.
Maybe a little bit, but
I got a few things to mention in this, but
yeah. I guess I'll start off with the traditional argument of fighting stick versus the gamepad, and I always found that interesting. Personally, I switch between the two of them depending on the game. I do have an arcade stick for a few of my consoles. I actually have one that'll work with the PS3 and PS4 in my
oh
computer.
nice.
And then I have one for the Switch as well because I play like Neo Geo games on that a lot, so I got one for that. But I always find it really interesting because like watching the like World Cup on Capcom Finals and stuff like that, and some of the MK stuff, and even like some of the anime fighting games and stuff like that. You have a very big like divide on like whether or not they use like a different peripheral. But the neat thing is, it's always like what I found interesting. It's just like what you're accustomed to. So like I personally started playing fighting games whenever against people in the cinema before
Okay.
going to see a movie. I would always show up like an hour early and then hang out and then play like House of the Dead and some of the other shoot 'em up games. And then the fighting games like Capcom versus SNK and stuff like that, and Street Fighter and whatnot against people and try and like get good per se. I've never really super been really good at them, but I do really enjoy fighting games just
Yeah.
because the type of game I really enjoy. So it was mainly the challenge, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, to the peripherals, always found it interesting to like watch these like pro players play with their peripherals because like there's even one guy who like uses a PS1 controller, Luffy.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and he's so used to the buttons, I guess. But and that's what he like got good on, right? And like everybody has their own thing, and there's many different parts and so many different options and stuff like that. And like if I were to use somebody else's arcade stick, like my friend who I play some fighting games with, if I use his arcade stick, like um uh, his actual fighting stick itself is different. We have the same buttons but different because I replaced his
Oh.
buttons, but his arcade stick was the same, and I can't use his stick because it's
It just doesn't feel right.
the Z motions and stuff like that don't, or quarter circles don't really feel right. But I always found that really interesting. So um, let me know what you guys use. I would be interested in that debate.
I mean, I kind of used whatever because I never
Yeah.
had that. I didn't really much. I didn't have that arcade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess upbringing.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I went to an arcade, I was usually by myself, and I
Right.
would just kind of stick to the things that I could play by myself.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did play a lot of the like House of the Dead and that, but
Mm-hmm.
not so much the fighting games because they weren't really.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like a side scroller beat 'em up because you can play that alone
Yeah.
and not feel like a total wiener.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're playing Street Fighter by yourself,
Yeah.
you
Well,
have people waiting to like play that don't want to play with you.
and
I wasn't popular.
that brings me to what I wanted to talk about second is the birth of online play. So like as this happened in first person shooters, it was something really big that's happened in fighting games.
Yeah,
So before you would have to go to the arcade to actually like play people on like Mortal Kombat 2 or like Street Fighter 2 or whatnot or King of Fighters or any of the other games that you've been playing. But the cool thing now is that like and that progressively happened more and more over time was that online play became more available like Dreamcast onwards, and then you were able to like eventually like in the 360 era and the PS3 era specifically, like every fighting game had online play basically.
yeah,
The real detriment to that is like, did it keep its player base? Because like I know a couple of anime fighting games that I've played in the past, like Fighting Climax that I really enjoyed. But I only played it like loosely with a couple of my friends. And anytime I went online, it was either somebody who was like really, really good, or like they'd never really played a fighting game before, or that maybe it was latency. I don't really know.
yeah,
But yeah, it's interesting that the online play is now like getting better, but you still like get into those issues of like 30 frames and 60 frames and like whether or not your computer can keep up to 60 frames or like if your PlayStation can actually run the game or you know what I mean, or like if their internet is good or if they're on Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So you still have tons of problems because people just won't plug in their fucking Xbox but into
I'm
wired
still
internet.
not plugging it in, JC. I
Yeah.
don't care.
But it's interesting because, like first-person shooters, the frames really matter in a fighting game, and you need to be able to frame read and stuff like that. And that's the thing that I'm not especially great at, but I find very, very interesting watching videos of people explaining it and just trying to get better myself and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and being able to have that option now instead of like sometimes I would go to the arcade and there would be nobody there, right? And then all of a sudden I'd be like, okay, well I'm going to be here for an hour, and then I would just spend my money on a different game or something like that, or keep
Yeah,
my money for popcorn or something, right? But yeah, I think that's really cool how it's evolved into that, because before it was just like people on their Genesis or Super Nintendo and stuff like that at home and whatnot, and some friends just aren't good at them, and there's always that one guy who has the game and then he got really good at it and stuff like that. Like I felt that way with Smash Brothers, for example,
yeah,
because like I never had a Nintendo 64 and I didn't really play any Smash Brothers until the GameCube, and I didn't own it for the GameCube either. But I went to some LAN parties where it's like, oh, you like King of Fighters and all those SNK games and stuff like that. And it's like, why don't you play Smash Brothers with us? And I would get totally fucking owned because the system of that game, though the
it's
skills are
so different.
transferable, they've played it so much, and like the system is different enough that it's like, oh shit, I gotta put in like a few hours into this game before I start like getting decent at the game, and then progressively get better and better, right?
Yeah,
And I always found that interesting. But with now the online play, to finish and go full circle, they have like the ranked brackets and stuff like that,
Yeah.
kind of like League of Legends, and like it might be like Ultra Silver or something like that. But then I'm playing other Ultra Silver or Gold players and stuff like that, or just normal Silver players, and be able to play people who are my skill level, irregardless if I'm platinum or if I'm like unranked or something like that. That that's still at least there, but
Yeah.
that's underneath the assumption that the game is still being played. Because if it's not, it's just going to match you somebody with that who's going
Well,
to kill you.
I mean, I will say about fighting games, I was always really intrigued by the community.
Hmm.
I know even from like being like well, I mean, much younger, going to conventions
Yeah,
and seeing the video game rooms, and you would always see the fighting game people like
yeah,
together. You know, everyone's kind of huddled around a couple of TVs. No matter what games are being played,
yeah.
everyone's there and everyone's excited.
Hmm.
You know, I've gotten exposure to things that were a little bit more obscure,
Hmm.
like stuff I can't think of right now, but like the Naruto fighting games,
Right.
which I always thought were kind of like, I didn't think that they were as big of a deal, but then you
Yeah,
see
there's a lot
like
of people who play those and the Dragon
20
Ball
guys
ones.
around a TV playing
Yeah,
Naruto, and I'm like, this is really cool, and like they're
hmm,
using the substitutions,
yeah,
and it's just like when you watch them play, it's interesting because they're using all these skills that I have no idea.
yeah. Linking and chaining and all this other
Yeah,
stuff.
and that like I said, the substitutions are just the coolest because it's
Yeah.
like you just punched like a stump.
Hmm.
It was really fun to watch,
Yeah.
and like some of them I've been like, oh man, and like gone out afterwards and bought them
Yeah.
and played them for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm horrible at this, and I'm not gonna get better.
It's just something that takes time. I know, like, there's a convention that's near us in Toronto, Anime North,
Yeah, that's kind of where I
and
saw.
there's always a good fighting game and like Dance Dance Revolution pack of people there, and that's actually where I played Guilty Gear for the first time. But it's a different like four button like a light heavy at least the one that I played was like just light heavy attacks, and I'm not super used to those type whenever I first got introduced to that game. This is like PlayStation 2 or something like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, everybody was like really friendly because like, oh, what game have you played? Like, what character have you played and stuff like that? Like, who's your main, right? And it'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, I play Street Fighter 2. My main is Cammy, and like this is the type of character I would play. And then I don't even know who the character was, but like play this for like 5 rounds against like person, and then this is how you do a couple of the moves and stuff like that, and then bring up the cheat sheet on like your laptop or whatever, and then for the combos and stuff, and
Yeah.
just like play it a bunch. And everybody's really nice about like being like, okay, he's also new, you play him, and okay, let's see how badly you get beat now against the good guy. It's like, oh, because you can put disabilities on some of the games too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can make it so that you take more damage or something like that, so it's a little bit more of a handicap or something like that. I never found those to be overly effectively good, but it's still an option, and everybody still has fun doing it. And I agree, the community has always, to me, been very good. Except for like that one guy, but like
Well,
there's
that's
always
okay.
that
There's
one
always
guy in
that
every
one guy,
community.
right?
Yeah, he won't move because he's got the quarters and no one's beat him yet. So it's just let my friend and I play each other. Yeah. The games in specific though, the some of my favorite fighting games have always been because most of my friends in the 90s always played Mortal Kombat. And in that era, I always played Street Fighter. Instead, I also did play Mortal Kombat 2 more than any of the other ones, but I didn't like it as much. And then eventually, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I started like getting exposure to all the King of Fighting games and the Fatal Fury games, stuff like that. Basically, anything SNK.
Yeah.
And I thought that those were really cool because they played differently. And the character rosters were generally a lot larger. So then, though some of the character move sets were similar, if I sometimes you play and like, oh, I like this move set out of this person and that move set out of this other person, and because there's so many fighters in King of Fighters, you could generally find somebody who has like those two different move
Those
sets
two
because
qualities.
those two qualities. And that's not always true, but like I thought that was kind of neat. And then back to some of my favorite fighting games. like especially in high school era in the early 2000s, and still played them in college actually, was Capcom versus SNK 2. And that game was like basically at this one theater that we used to go to like for years until I think it finally broke down. Somebody might have broken it, but but it was there for like probably 8 years or something like
Wow.
that. Yeah, and everyone played that like cab, and like we would always play like on the consoles, and then because I had a fighting stick for my PS2, and then I would go over to the arcade and like try and like beat people there, and like that game was whenever I like finally like, you know, choose a main, choose like a roster of characters, and then actually like try and get good and like be able to beat somebody instead of just be like totally random and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those were always some of my favorite memories of that was going to the one arcade that I knew of that had that. It was actually a theater that had an attached arcade, but yeah. So that the Mortal Kombat games I always found interesting because they're like button combinations are different. Like in the Injustice games and the newest Mortal Kombat games, you kind of like have to like press two buttons at a time for some of the moves. Where like as a, like I've kind of like hinted like I play Street Fighter and SNK games, so like they're a lot different, right? So like
Yeah.
you have to do like more quarter circle actions and stuff like that. And it was kind of funny because like my cousin, who's never really played any fighting games except for like Injustice and Mortal Kombat, and I tried to teach him how to actually like do the quarter circles and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I'll just do light punch. This is the only button that I have, right? I think I still beat him, but um, uh, but it was kind of neat to be able to like transfer that knowledge and stuff like that. And then he was like super frustrated, but I think eventually he was starting to get it and stuff like that. Whenever he saw like the Hadouken, he was just like, what? Yeah, it was like, how do I do that? It's like, well, you got to keep on doing the same motion, do it over and over again. And it just attests to like the the persistence that you need. It's kind of like League, right? It's just
The
something
more
that
you
like
do
the
something,
more
the
you do
more.
it, the better you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of the other games that I like to go over that like I think a lot of my friends in college used to play, but like I didn't really enjoy them as much. And I'll probably get some hate for this because it's a really popular game, but I've never really liked Primal Rage. I've never really understood it. Um,
I liked it as a kid,
yeah,
but I think that was more so just because it was like
like monsters.
dinosaurs and
Yeah,
stuff and dinosaurs beating each other up. Yeah, I mean,
I
it
think that's
it
the main
looks
reason
kind of
why.
rough.
Yeah, the arcade version doesn't look that bad.
Okay.
But and then there's the 64 version, I think is the one that a lot of people play too, and that's not that bad. But I always thought it was more interesting to play with humans rather than or even aliens, it doesn't matter, but like humanoids rather than like monsters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because there's even like weird obscure ones with like robots fighting each other and stuff, and it's just kind of interesting. But I always thought like the like that and like Clay Fighter 63 and a third, like I kind of like this is very unfair to say because I know Primal Rage is a good game in its own right and stuff like that and very popular. But like I just haven't given it time. But I always find it interesting how there's like you have your human ones and then you have like monster ones, and you also have like anime ones and stuff like that, and you can kind of like sort of branch each of the different ones into their own categories and their own like fighting sets and stuff like that. And I like ones with teams and things like that. That's why I've started to play the SNK games, and I find it interesting how like a bunch of the Capcom games started to like add some of that in with some of their games, like
Well, the teams I find kind of neat because then you can, for me, who I'm not good,
hmm
I can play a couple of different characters
yeah.
and I can see them like do stuff.
Yeah. To
And
be
that,
fair, a lot of people they can only play a few characters. Like they can play everybody, but they're only really, really good at like a couple characters.
yeah,
Like I
again,
play
it's that similar to League
Cammy
where
a
you kind
lot,
of
and
have
then
a
I can also play
main.
Akuma. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're totally different types of characters, but that's who I practice with in Street Fighter 5 anyway. But yeah. And what else? So uh, the other interesting thing about them is kind of like their rosters start to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And now it's just kind of like like a lot of like DLC basically with their costumes and stuff like that. A lot of people hate DLC, but like the fighting game community, like they really do buy at least from my perspective, they really do buy a lot of the DLC because like every
Well,
time.
yeah. The last I think the last DOA game was pretty
Mhm.
much free
Yeah,
to get the base game,
but
and
it
then everything
hundreds
else
and hundreds
costs
of
you money.
dollars if you want. But the thing is, like, you're generally only like I've only bought all the costumes for like three characters,
Yeah.
right? So it only maybe cost me like, I don't know, there's 15 or 17 characters or something like that. Like, I can't recall off the top of my head, but like, you know what I mean? I'm not doing it for everybody, right?
No.
And I've always found it funny because other people will look at the game. It's like, it costs $3,000 to buy that game, like, and everything with it. It's like, no, not really.
Yeah, I mean, if you were gonna get everything, but you don't need everything,
Yeah.
and that's sort of. I mean, I love the huge rosters
Hmm.
because it's that like every time one of the
It doesn't
like
help.
Marvel versus Capcom,
Yeah.
especially when those come out, or the way less known Tetsunoku versus Capcom
Hmm.
for the Wii.
Right.
Like that was super cool because
Yeah.
you had that huge roster of these like obscure characters,
Hmm.
and just like yeah, being able to even like honestly just going through the menu and like looking at the different characters and being like, oh shit, it's this guy,
Yeah.
or like I recognize you from like whatever.
Yeah, that's what I really like about like the X-Men and the Marvel games because you have that element to it. It's like, holy crap, they put like this person in there. Like there's actually like Gambit's in one of them. Like holy
Yeah,
crap, like that's really cool. He's my favorite character or whatever. And they can cycle through all these different characters and you know, they to some people from the outside a lot of it just looks the same, but it's um it is different enough that it's like to those players it's really cool. Yeah.
I mean
But
like I think the only fighting game I really got into,
mhm.
other than some of the Dragon Ball Z ones,
Mhm.
was Blaze Blue,
Right.
and I really dug it. Like I picked it up, I think on the cheap
Right.
for the Xbox 360.
Mhm.
And I loved that even though I had no idea what I was doing,
Mhm.
I'd still feel like I was doing stuff.
Yeah.
And the characters were all like really different.
Yeah. I feel
And
like
just
the
like
new
beautifully drawn and animated.
mhm.
So it was like, I'm like, this is cool. And it was bright, it was colorful. You're doing like these huge moves and like getting combos by just like fucking crab clawing your controller.
Yeah.
And every like whenever people would come over, I'd be like, we have to play this game. This is so
Mhm.
much fun. And a lot of people that I hung around with had fun with it. Like even
Yeah.
not being familiar with the genre. Because
Mhm.
again, like I said, you can just like
Yeah, and
button
especially
mash your
like
way through it, and just like stuff's happening and colors and
yeah.
yeah,
I
man.
find like a good game you might want to try if you like that style of a fighting game would be the new Dragon Ball game because it's very
I
very
I
flashy.
I know I
It
have played it.
I played it a
It's
little bit
neat
because my friend
because
got it.
again, you can like do a lot with minimal skill,
Mhm.
but then somebody with actual skill
Yeah.
can do that much more.
Mhm.
And it's really cool. I like that kind of like high ceiling,
Yeah.
but like
And
also high floor.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like watching the professional scene so much. And
Hmm.
I probably watch the professional scene more than I actually play the games because it's like their skill level is so out there that it's just like astonishing just looking at exactly how they basically counteract some of the stuff that they're doing and then like somebody new comes along with the new playset and stuff like that like a couple years ago this one guy came in to the Capcom Pro Tour and I'm sorry I forget his name but he played Birdie and like I never really understood why he was necessarily a really good character and then I saw him play it and I'm like holy shit I totally get it
Yeah.
and like yeah, and even like if you suck and you watch somebody who plays a character who you're really really good at, like I said, I play Cammy and I watch a couple of pro players who play Cammy, and I watch them play and I'm like, oh crap, I can do that, and you know what I mean. And eventually you get to that cusp where it's like you understand if you watch what they're doing and you can play, and it's like you understood like what they link together or chain together, in order to kind of accomplish what they did, and you can kind of like test it out in the practice mode,
Yeah.
because like any good fighting game has a practice mode. And if not, then you just use the CPU. But
Now, how do you feel about the like weapon-based fighting games?
I don't play them as often, but I do really like Samurai Showdown, which is kind of like a weapon-based fighting game because some
Okay.
of the some of the fighters in that game do have weapons and stuff. Some of them don't, but like I think 90% of them do, if I recall correctly. And I'm really excited about the new one that's coming out. Um, yeah, so I do like them. Soul Calibur is another example that really stands out to mind that I really enjoyed as well. That was on the Dreamcast, or at least that's what I played it on. And I really enjoyed that game. And I also played Soul 2 on GameCube, and I think they're kind of cool. To your weapons one, I do, and I'm glad you mentioned this because one of my favorite fighting games ever is Bushido Blade.
Oh, same.
Yeah, and so the I like I keep on switching back and forth, but right now I'm gonna say I like the first one better. But the if they were to make that game new, and I know there's like Kengo and some other newer games that are based off the same engine and stuff like that, but like um I never felt they were the same. But if they were to like make more of those types of games, I think a lot of people would play them.
I think so
It's
too.
just a little frustrating that you die in one hit, but
But that's the what makes it interesting.
yeah.
As someone who practiced kendo for a long time,
Hmm.
being able to see someone switch between different stances
Yeah.
that I recognize
Yeah.
and
Yeah, because they're
doing
all real. Like it's very it's bad graphics for the time, like for now. Not for the time, but yeah, like a lot of the moves that they do with the different weapons and stuff are very realistic in their parries and stuff like that. And
yeah, and like and you would actually you can transition like
hmm
I guess real martial arts knowledge into actually
yeah,
playing because you want to play against some of these different weapons
yep,
with different weapons the way you actually would
hmm
fight with them.
yeah,
Not to sound all like weird about it, but
hmm
it's kind of true. Like if
yep,
someone has a pole arm or like a much longer sword,
yeah.
and you have something quite a bit shorter,
You've got to approach it
you want to be really close
very
in,
differently. Yeah.
whereas they want to fight you at more of more length,
hmm
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I love Bashir. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
That game's
It's
amazing.
a really, really good game. I wish the IP didn't like die from Square, but then they went through their uh they went through their phase of like trying everything, and then they kind of
Yeah.
like no Parasite Eve and no Bushido
Maybe
Blade.
someday.
No,
Probably
it's
not.
done. We don't need another one. Yeah, fighting games. I really like them. I'm always interested to like see how some of the other new ones play in the different genres. There used to be, I think, a lot more of them, and now it's kind of like consolidated into like a good core amount of them, and
Hmm.
it could be probably for the better in my opinion because now they're kind of like iterating and stuff like that off of each other
Yeah.
because like a new one comes out every year and or every couple of years depending on what company it is, but they're always like competing against each other and stuff like that and iterating and innovating off of each other. Sometimes it's not that much of an innovation, but you take what you can get.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you get a little bit more of a focused community with a smaller
Hmm.
title pool
Yeah.
instead of being like super spread out over like, 30 or 40 different games.
Yeah.
Now you've got like 7 or 8
Yeah, it's not
kind of
like, oh,
major
there's lasers
titles.
in this one, so that's why this one's cool. But it's exactly the same. It's like actual like core like game engine mechanics that I feel a lot of the companies are really concentrating on now, which has basically made the games a lot more playable and in some cases a lot more newbie friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, fighting games. Okay, in our second segment, first person shooters.
First person shooters.
Yeah, so you want to start off with first person shooters?
Absolutely, I do. Because this is a genre that has been kind of big for me.
Yeah.
So when I was like super young, I managed to get my hands on a copy of Wolfenstein
Mm-hmm.
for the PC,
Cool.
and yeah, I mean it was cool, but it wasn't anything too crazy because it basically looked like uh, like screensaver, your like classic Windows
Oh, I
screensaver,
remember
the,
that
like
screensaver.
moving down the hallways,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was kind of dull, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't play Wolfenstein until much later, and it was just
some
because I wanted to go back to it.
well, yeah, I mean, it's curious to see the like past, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but like I think a few months after that, maybe even a year, I
Right.
managed to get Doom,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of opened things up for me. It was a
Right.
much more like at the time visceral shooter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a lot to it. You had a huge variety of like different types of weapons,
Yeah.
not just things that were a little bit more standard. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you had like a pistol, or in Wolfenstein, you had the pistol, a shotgun, uh, a rifle,
Right.
and then the chain gun.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you had a few more options
Yeah.
in Doom,
Mm-hmm.
and the combat seemed a lot have more of a punch to it.
Yeah. And things were kind of like more in your face because like you had fireballs being thrown at you, and there
Yeah,
was monsters and stuff like that, which was
yeah,
definitely
and like all the hell beasts and stuff.
yeah.
It was intense
Mm-hmm.
for like a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I should not have been playing Doom, but
Yeah.
it kind of like it got me started, and it was like one of those like, oh man, this is super cool. And then as like time went on and like new stuff was coming out, I think everybody I knew had played Half-Life,
Right.
because again, that was like one of the most important shooter or first person shooters at the time.
Yeah, that or Unreal and Quake.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, because you had Quake and then Unreal sort of following Doom,
Yeah.
and then Half-Life was this like actual story.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lot of stuff going on. But it wasn't so much the story in Half-Life that was kind of important to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the things that came from it. Because
Counter Strike.
that was the first time I really got, well, Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
But I mean, Half-Life itself had a multiplayer mode in it.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you had Team Fortress
Right.
as well. And that's what got me interested in all the multiplayer stuff.
Oh, okay. So was that really your first like foray into like online multiplayer then?
Yeah, not even online multiplayer.
Okay.
That was the
Local LAN.
local LAN multiplayer.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a ton of other things like that around at the time. If you didn't have a great connection,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you weren't able to, log in, and there wasn't like you didn't have like platforms that you were playing within. Like you didn't have Steam.
Oh, there was Microsoft Gaming Zone and GameSpot back in like '97 to like 2004.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah, I used to play a lot of RTSs online, so
Okay,
that's where I met like my crews for that.
but like that was like the LAN experience
Yeah,
was
for
kind of
sure.
what like that. I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. You know, you get like everyone takes their PC over, and by the time you actually get everything working
Hmm.
and talking to one another, half of the people are asleep,
Yeah.
and you play as many rounds of like Counter Strike, or I mean just deathmatch usually, because
Oh,
by
okay.
that point there's like four people awake, and a four-person game of Counter Strike or Team Fortress is not as fun.
Right. Yeah. Most of my friends who played like 1.6 was counter terrorists is what we usually always played. Not so much deathmatch. Personally, I've never found deathmatch interesting. That's one of the reasons why I never liked FPSs. Though I like fighting games, so whatever,
I know it's
hypocrite.
kind of the same thing, but kind of not.
Kind of, but kind of not. Yeah, there's a gray line.
But like those are for me. That was kind of the like what grabbed me in the
Yeah.
that multiplayer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, of course, Halo,
Mm-hmm.
because that kind of for me that came out of no. Well, I mean, I knew it was coming out. It was everything that anybody with an Xbox would talk about.
Yeah, that's that and Oblivion is no, sorry, Morrowind are the
Morrowind,
only Xbox games I really knew about.
but Morrowind was just a
I would have been
PC
more
port.
interested if I knew Panzer Dragoon Orta was on it.
I
Just
it,
saying. You know who you are.
Morrowind did nothing for me as a console game because I had played it already for probably a year on PC.
Oh, okay, cool.
So,
Everybody who was on PCs for me was playing Baldur's Gate, and then console Xbox was Morrowind. But anyway, I don't want to
yeah.
derail
Well,
from
yeah, we
the.
don't want to get too derailed, even though it's still first person game, but
That
that
is true.
different first person
Yeah,
experience, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
yeah,
But Halo, that was the real like huge movement forward, because now I'm taking my Xbox to somebody's house, or not even.
yeah. Because
Sometimes I'm just taking a controller.
the if I'm not mistaken, the console had local LAN capability, right? Just like
Yeah.
the GameCube. Okay,
So you hooked up to like
a router
a
or
router.
switch. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were running. There
Mm-hmm.
was no crazy setup. There was no like hours of trying to figure things out like there was at
Yeah.
the LAN parties I'd been to previously. This was like plug and play, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going. And like you can show up at 8 o'clock, and by the time everyone gets there and gets everything set, you're like playing within half an hour.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a big turning point, at least for the competitive stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Now.
but there's other things that sort of kind of showed me that like a first person shooter could be a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
than a first person shooter. Like I know now that there was other things that are much, well, arguably better, like System Shock.
Mm-hmm.
But I,
Yeah,
I
System Shock 2 is a really popular older
yeah,
game.
but it totally flew past me because what was big within my group was Deus Ex,
The original
the
one?
original
Oh,
one,
that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Because there was like it presented you with a situation,
Yeah, that game had puzzles in it.
and yeah, and you had
Like
options
legitimate puzzles,
with
not
how
just
you're
go
going
get
to
the key.
approach something. You could play something like a standard shooter. You could go in
Right.
guns blazing, but you could also like you could sneak in. You could have dialogue with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was so many different options
Right.
for something that was a shooter,
Yeah.
right? Like then
Yeah, the
it
game was very innovative for its time, for sure.
yeah.
And even I think the newest one had some pretty good innovation in it, if I understand correctly. I've never played either
I
of
mean,
them, so.
I did enjoy the newer ones as well,
Right.
but I like most important for me would have been the first one, because that's
Yeah.
like it's an experience
Mm-hmm.
that I got through, you'd get through like an adventure game.
So was a lot of your first person shooter experience on both PC and console?
Yep.
Or was it more so like on the consoles or some?
Surprisingly, it was kind of back and forth.
Oh, okay.
I I started on PC because really that was the only place where you were gonna play
Right, yeah.
a shooter for
Yeah,
the
especially
first
since Quake was the game that was like around for a very, very long time.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean I do remember I never had Quake
Okay.
myself, but a friend of mine had an older brother,
Mm-hmm.
and he had Quake.
Right.
I always remember that was my introduction to Nine Inch Nails,
Oh, okay, yeah.
because Trent Reznor did some of the soundtrack,
Yeah, pretty much all of it, I think.
and
For the
then
original soundtrack,
on
yeah.
top of that, the box of nails for the nail guns had the Nine Inch Nails logo on them.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I always thought that was super cool. So that was like I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like it's just something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the kind of back and forth for the most part. Um, we did like I think by the time Halo sort of came out,
Right.
there was way less PC shooters that I was playing at that time.
Yeah, a
Like there
lot of
was
them were starting to come out on the consoles because the like PlayStation 1 had like the Dual Shock like left and right thumbsticks, but they were starting to be really like effectively used PlayStation 2 onwards. So
yes.
like they kind of figured that you could look around and move with those two joysticks, and then like Xbox started doing it and
Like
PlayStation 2 started doing it.
I mean I played the first Red Faction
Hmm.
on PC.
Oh, okay,
Like
cool.
that was my exposure to that. But then when Red Faction 2 came out,
Right.
I played that on console,
Hmm.
which I wish I would have played it on PC,
Okay.
because the multiplayer in 2
Hmm.
was a lot more fun, but on the console, like I was only playing it against one person.
Oh, okay. Didn't
One,
have a multi
I didn't
tap.
have a multi-tap,
Yeah, I was
no.
like the only kid with a multi tap for every system.
Yeah, and I didn't know you back then, so I couldn't
Yeah.
play 4-player games with you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I know Red Faction was something that you really dug.
yeah, it was like the one game that I rented so much that I probably paid for the game like twice over. Because we would constantly, for a few months, just rent it for 3 days. And then we would basically get together on weekends and play board games and video games and stuff like that. And whenever this game had just come out, for the first like few months, we were constantly playing that game like 4 players on the PlayStation 2. And it was really, really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, I liked um, a lot of the one map I remember a lot of because I think most of the maps were designed this way, or we just played the ones that were designed this way. It was like base A and base B and then no man's land, but then we would always like terraform the walls to make like secret tunnels into their bases and stuff like
But
that, or like pop up in the middle, and
that
it was
was the
just
neat thing
so
about that.
unique and something I'd never seen before. So
Yeah, and it was another one of those games that yes, it was pretty much a standard shooter,
yeah.
but it still presented you with a situation and
Hmm.
you did have the option to work your way around.
Yeah, the other reason why I really like Red Faction personally is because, um, although I'll attest that it's not the greatest like story or game for the campaign, but like, it's actually quite lengthy. I think it's 10 to 15 hours if I recall
It
correctly,
was pretty long.
and it was enjoyable. It was very railroady, but like I would expect that from that type of game, and it was pretty enjoyable from what I remember. So I liked the campaign in that game quite a bit. I always wished more first-person shooters would come out with like campaigns were like that length because most of the first-person shooter games that I had been playing, which was like 6 hours or something, they didn't really
Yeah.
take long to beat, and this actually took me like a couple of like sit downs to actually like get through the game. So it took me like essentially 2 weekends because I would play the campaign before the guys would come over, and then we play multiplayer for like 6 hours or something. And then
Yeah, I remember it taking me a
yeah,
while to get through that.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, Red Faction was always pretty fun. I've never played the second one though, but I've heard the second one's campaign is pretty good. So maybe one day I'll go back and play that game, but we'll see.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
I'm working on getting him into shooters.
Yeah, I do
But
like first person shooters. It's just I don't like deathmatch FPS games. So the online
which
aspect really phases me. Like it's I don't know. It's not that I don't get it, it's just I don't find it enjoyable. I used to play with some friends. I wasn't very good, but Counter-Strike 1.6 for quite a while. I was part of some person's team, like a friend's team,
yeah.
and then it was like some people who he met online um from Quebec, and I had to relearn French for a little bit, but
That's
yeah,
pretty cool.
just the swear words basically. Oh, I did something wrong. Okay. Yeah, we used to play that, and it was more interesting because it was terrorist counter terrorists. But then whenever that team started getting into the death match, it was just like, okay, well, I'm just constantly respawning. I don't really find this entertaining at all.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, I have 150 kills. Like it's neat to watch people do that, and like I've like I get it, but I don't find it enjoyable personally.
I mean, for me, like I remember going over to someone's house. Like I had an Xbox at home,
Hmm.
but I hadn't really played a whole lot. Like I played some Halo, and I don't. Probably by that point, I hadn't been to like a Halo LAN party.
Yeah.
But I had like your the kind of necessary games. Like I bought my Xbox for Knights of the Old Republic
Right.
and some of the Sega titles
Hmm.
like Jet Set Radio Future.
Hmm.
But um, again, a friend's older brother playing Return to Castle Wolfenstein
Oh, okay.
online, and like it's team based.
Right.
You have different classes. You
Hmm.
have a medic
Yeah.
who is like very much a healing class.
And
Like you have an engineer that's kind of necessary for some of the levels
yeah.
to get you into places. Like
Hmm.
it was really interesting. It was one of those like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on,
Yeah.
and it's online.
Hmm.
And like I don't need to know anybody. I can just jump on and play.
Yeah, and the team-based stuff, kind of like Overwatch, for example, is something that I do actually like because you do have different classes and characters and stuff like that that have certain abilities, and that's more interesting to me than like everybody essentially just being a rifleman and running around and shooting everybody. That's
But what's
more
funny was that
specifically.
Return to Castle Wolfenstein kind of pushed me like that's
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, I'm getting this Xbox Live service.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pay for it.
Hmm.
And the first thing, or one of the first games that I saw that came with a headset without me buying it separately was Rainbow Six 3.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up playing a ton of that,
Right.
but not competitively.
Oh,
We
okay.
would play the terrorist hunts online together.
Oh, okay.
So you'd still have your squad of like 4 people,
Hmm.
but you'd be like working through these levels, just picking off bots
Yeah.
essentially, who had roots and like could be alerted, and
Yeah.
we had so much fun playing together against the computer.
Yeah.
It was
The Gears of War is like that too, right? Where
yeah.
because I played the first Gears of War on the 360, and it's like a co-op adventure that your campaign, I should say,
Mhm.
that you're going through, in your like I think it's two player.
It is 2 player, yeah.
Yeah. So you and your friend can go through and shoot them up. Hmm.
But like I don't the Rainbow Six was kind of the first, and that had the headset, and then from there it was all downhill. It was like, oh, really competitive Halo and
Yeah.
all of that. But like,
So you got Rainbow Six before Halo, or are you talking about like
well, no,
Halo
the
2?
Halo before Halo 2,
Oh, okay.
and
Do you play more Halo than Halo 2 or the other way around?
I would have played more Halo 2,
Right.
way more Halo 2, because we
Yeah.
were like I said, super competitive with it,
Hmm.
playing like tons of ranked team deathmatch
Yeah.
all night.
That's cool.
It was ridiculous. But then like when we move into the 360,
Hmm.
that's what like I feel like that was a big turning point because you see a lot of experimentation with the first person shooter genre.
Yeah, I agree because like there was a lot of experimentation in the mid to late 90s, and then there was like a lot of stagnation in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's whenever I kind of like came on board, so to speak, which is probably why I'm a little jaded to it. And then again, in like the 360 era, as you're saying, there is more innovation because the technology kind of like pushed forward a little bit.
Well, I mean,
Because like
even
the innovation was online during that like stagnation, so like there wasn't really a stagnation. It was just like the gameplay wasn't really being innovated. It was just like
it's like now
all
you
the
can
online.
do it online with
Yeah,
people.
which is a huge innovation in itself. Don't get me
True.
wrong,
Oh,
but
absolutely. And
yeah.
there was some really cool experiences on the Xbox to
Hmm.
have in a first person manner.
Right.
But you really got new experiences, and this is kind of where this whole conversation came from. I was like, let's talk about shooters, and JC's like, I'm not a big shooter fan, and I'm like, but there's some really interesting experiences that you can have, and like
Hmm.
for like a launch title for the 360, Condemned,
Okay.
Criminal Origins. I think it was Criminal Origins,
I'm not sure.
but Condemned. There was a second one as well, which wasn't as good, but the first one was like it was super creepy. Um, when it was
You're,
a lot of melee combat,
hmm
and
It is Criminal Origins.
it was Criminal Origins. I was right, but it was a launch title.
Hmm.
Um, it was very atmospheric. You had these like really interesting puzzle sections where you're doing like forensic work,
Right.
and when you find a weapon, like a handgun, or I think there was a shotgun as well,
Okay.
they had limited ammunition.
Right.
Like they had what was loaded in them, and when your clip was dry, it was dry.
Hmm.
And you're like tossing it until you find another one.
Yeah.
Like it was an interesting experience, and then from there you move into even more like interesting things with like Mirror's Edge,
Hmm.
which you don't even need to touch a weapon. We talked about that in Great Platformers
Yeah.
because it's a great platformer
Yeah.
as well.
It's in the first person perspective for sure.
Yeah. And to me, like it's also I would also consider it a shooter because really you could play it that way if you wanted to.
Okay.
You could get your hands on a weapon fairly early on, and you can light people up.
Yeah, I guess you can. It's been
Yeah,
a while since I played that game,
you
so
can kick a guard and take his gun.
yeah.
I mean, you gotta take it from him, but
Hmm.
and then like Portal,
I love Portal. That game was a puzzle game.
still a shooter,
Well, it's first person puzzle game.
first person shooter. You
Sure.
solve puzzles with a gun.
Okay.
You solve puzzles with a gun,
Teleporter, but yeah.
but it's a gun that shoots the
Yeah,
portals.
yeah, yeah. No, I am not fully disagreeing with you. It's
Sort of, but
yeah.
not totally.
What I really liked about the Portal series was the second one had the co-op campaign,
That was amazing,
and
and
that
you
was
only had
really
the one
really
color.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was really cool because I played that through with a friend, and that was actually my introduction to Portal. I saw people playing it at the first one at a LAN party, and I watched them play it, but I never actually played it. And then the first time I actually played Portal was whenever the second one came out with the campaign.
yeah.
And my friend and I sat down. I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool. So then like I went through and then like played Portal 1 and
Well, it
Portal
was it
2.
was just so different, and the story was so interesting,
Yeah.
and all the little hidden things, and like, yeah, it
Mhm.
again, it's something that kind of pushed that genre further.
Mhm.
It's like you can do a lot more than just have a gun
Right.
and, move down a hallway.
Yep.
And I'm a lot of things still did that. Like I always enjoyed the Call of Duty games. I'd been picking them up since probably I think I want to say Call of Duty 2
Right.
on the 360. I think it was the Call of Duty 2 was the first one on the 360.
Okay.
And they did an amazing for the time depiction of like the invasion of Normandy.
Mhm.
Um that was really cool.
Yeah, I've played
Like coming off the boat
don't
and the like.
I don't remember the games very well, but like the Call of Duty games very well, but I've played the first one and the second one. I do know that.
Yeah, and it was cool. And then like I think the third one had some like individual stories of like different countries' involvement.
Yeah.
And they did have a small Canadian campaign,
Oh, that's
which I
cool.
thought was really neat because that's
Yeah.
not something you typically see in war games. You really don't see representation of the Canadian forces,
Yeah.
which we had such a big involvement
Mhm.
in that. So,
Yes.
to
We're part of the British Commonwealth.
yeah, so we get really downplayed,
Mhm.
but then we got Call of Duty 4,
Mhm.
which I mean I picked up. I'm like, yeah, it's a Call of Duty game. I'll grab it.
Right.
I always enjoyed the campaigns.
Mhm.
The multiplayer never really took off for me.
Right.
But then this Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, you had a really interesting story. It's
Mhm.
like a modern story.
Yeah.
Um, one of what I still think is the best missions in a shooter ever.
Mhm.
And then the multiplayer, which I will say you haven't really like a lot of things are just a mold of that
Right.
at this point,
Yeah.
with the exception of the whole like battle royale genre,
Mhm.
which yeah, but
Yeah, but
as far as your standard shooter goes, a lot of things are built off of the modern warfare formula. But at the time, there wasn't anything else like it.
Mhm.
So it was really interesting to be like, you would keep playing to get that next rank, to unlock that next weapon, and to like progress.
Yeah.
It had a
Okay.
really good reward system.
Oh, okay.
Like it pushed you to want to do better.
Right.
And I played a ton of it,
Mhm.
an absolute ton. I mean, I picked up the second one when it came out, and it didn't do anything for me really. I didn't, it wasn't too fussed by the story. Um,
Call of Duty.
Modern Warfare 2,
Okay.
which technically Call of Duty 5. Um,
Okay.
I know
7 or
it
10
gets so
or
confusing,
yeah.
but it's almost as bad as the Rambo series. But anyways,
Yeah.
I thought by that point they kind of, and like the mission where you walk through the airport, like just shooting up civilians, it was shock value for the sake of shock value, and I just
I've never played the game, but I know what that is.
yeah, exactly. Everyone knows, and it was one of the
I
most
was like, "What are you
ridiculous
talking?" Oh no,
things.
I know what that is.
And it's like it pulled the genre back,
Right.
and you kind of didn't really. And at that point too, a lot of the shooters that were coming out were just like strictly multiplayer.
Yeah, that's the big thing that I dislike about the first person shooter like games mainly is because a lot of it's I really like multiplayer games, but a lot of its focus is multiplayer. And I would also like the main campaign. You know what I mean? That's why I'm interested in some of the newer stuff that has been coming out that isn't getting canceled. That is like these types of games with all the multiplayer, but then has like a campaign that's longer than 6 hours.
Well, I think we're getting back to that point now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've kind of things sort of wound down a little bit, and a lot of there was a lot of like push towards strictly multiplayer content
Yeah.
for a while. I mean, there was interesting things coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Brink, which was totally overlooked. It was like um, a late release on the 360,
Right.
but it was a very kinetic
Mm-hmm.
shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the Borderlands games, which really started mixing together your
Yeah.
like loot whoring and
Yeah. I played Borderlands 2 with a friend for an extended period of time,
yeah,
and
and
it was really, really
it
fun.
was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the third one.
Yeah. I might
Uh,
actually sit down and play the second one if I have enough friends who do it. So,
yeah, like I'm in.
all right.
But yeah,
What
you
platform are we
you
getting this
did.
for? If it's
I'm
Epic,
not
I'm out.
supporting anybody quite yet.
PlayStation.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you had this like everything's kind of pushing multiplayer, and then you even see that at the beginning of this generation.
Right.
You have like Destiny
Mm-hmm.
and Destiny 2, which I mean they were
Yeah, and
fine. They
they're
were
FPSs, and I like those ones, but they're loot shooters. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're still first-person shooters, but like,
yeah,
I like them because they're
a little looty and
they're
a
loot
little bit
shooters.
shooty.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I wanted Anthem to do well. But anyway,
they it still fell kind of flat for me, and like I picked up like the first Titanfall,
yeah,
and I loved the mechanics,
hmm,
but I hated that there was no campaign.
right,
But when the second one came out with a full campaign and like sort of fleshed out characters and
hmm.
a decent enough story, like I loved it.
I guess I wouldn't really say that Titan Fall 2 is a hidden gem because so many people have mentioned that it's a hidden gem at this point.
Okay,
But
okay,
like,
fine.
this is like
Oh,
what I'm
I
saying.
guess I didn't say it was a hidden gem.
You didn't. This is what I'm saying. So like, I've heard enough people say that it's a hidden gem. Like, if you like first-person shooters and stories and like mechanics and stuff, like this sounds like it's the game that
You
you need to
should be
pick up.
trying Titanfall.
Yeah,
It needs
it looks
appreciation.
really interesting for sure.
And again, it's very kinetic. It's the kind of thing where you could probably get through a lot of levels without touching the ground.
Right.
And then they introduce new mechanics frequently,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not like it doesn't rely solely on one thing.
Right.
It's very much open, and
Mm-hmm.
they introduce new things, and they're not necessarily there forever. So,
Yep.
you know, you kind of have new mechanics that you get to play with for a little bit, you get familiar with it and comfortable with it, and then it's to the point where it might feel kind of old is when kind of gone.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I really dug it. And then you had like the new Resident Evil,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
entirely in first person.
The horror genre, in like a first-person shooter, motif is really interesting to me
Well,
because
that's
like
Sorry.
Because like I really enjoyed playing RE7 in VR,
Yeah.
and it was really really cool. And like there's also some FPS games on PlayStation VR, like Bravo Team, and there's another one that I'm forgetting.
Farpoint.
That's it. Thank you. And those games are really really cool, especially with like the aim controller.
Yeah.
Um, and like Doom, the
Yep.
remake in VR uses the
VFR.
VFR Doom, yeah. And all those games they use the and that's kind of like rekindled my like um interest in the genre.
When you're seeing again, you're seeing the genre pull from other places
Yeah.
because we had a lot of really good like for a while we had a lot of good like walking sims
Mm-hmm.
that were also scary, like things like Amnesia,
Yep.
um, the Outlast,
Mm-hmm.
Slenderman,
Yeah.
and I mean there's more,
Mm-hmm.
but then you're now starting to see incorporation of that stuff like
Yeah,
that's
and
that's how you
that's
get that RE7
like in
where you
the
have a frightening experience but you
mm-hmm.
have that weapon.
And like I know hybrid genres. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode. I know hybrid genres have been happening for a really long time, but like I feel like the PlayStation 2 era onwards is really like when a lot of hybrid genres started to like emerge. And
Hmm.
then like the 360 PlayStation 3 era is like whenever it was kind of like a little bit more commonplace. And now that it's more commonplace, you're starting to see all this stuff, and it's really cool because you see different things that are more um, like role playing games and first person shooters are the same
Yeah,
thing, and
like
different
there's a lot
mechanics and stuff like
more
that.
depth to
Or
the
they'll just,
genre.
yeah, they'll grab like one or two mechanics that they really like out of a different genre and then just add it into their own like systems and game engines, and then basically like work off of that. And then you get things like Borderlands, for example, because you have like the loot aspect from like Diablo inserted into a campaign and like
Yeah,
adventures and stuff like that, and and then you add in like levels and stuff like that, right? So it's like, okay, well, I've got all these like items that have different levels and like loot
I've got
from
myself that
Diablo,
has multiple levels
yeah,
and like different
skills and stuff
ability
like
like
that,
class abilities.
yeah. So like
um
everything starts to like kind of like conjoin together and like um just come up with unique and interesting new ideas. It's really cool.
like I'm excited to see where it goes at this point because it really feels like if you're kind of looking back and following it,
Hmm.
you see a lot of like testing the waters with different things.
Yeah.
Like you see attempts at doing like some hybrid genres on the like PS2, like you were
Yeah.
saying, so you get things that are slightly different.
Hmm.
And then they kind of push it a little bit further
Yeah.
when you get into the next gen with the 360 and the PS3. And that was, I mean, that was really the multiplayer genre
Hmm.
or multiplayer, like, um, not genre, innovation.
Yep.
Like, that's when they're really pushing that forward.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you're seeing a lot of really great story driven content
Hmm.
that there's like the combining of genres to get this really interesting thing with that kind of like mixing of everything and
Hmm.
the all of this like previous experience that we're moving forward with.
Right.
I'm excited to see the experiences that we're going to start seeing. I mean,
Right.
we haven't seen anything of the Jedi Fallen Order.
Right.
Like all we've seen is some like demo video, like just
Hmm.
non-gameplay video.
Yep.
And there's a very real possibility. I mean, it'd be cool to see it as a third person game, but there's a possibility it might be first person.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that one might be third person,
It
but
might be, but you have to remember we had Dark Forces ages ago,
hmm,
and that was first person.
I haven't thought of Dark Forces in a really long time. That's cool.
But it
Yeah.
again, you have Dark Forces gave you really interesting things that you didn't really see at the time. Now it was
Yeah.
all PC based, so if you didn't have a PC, it's
Yeah.
something that you weren't going to experience.
Yeah. I had a friend who really liked the well, Jedi Academy 1 and 2. No,
Yep, but those were third person.
were they?
Yes.
I
Yeah,
thought
the
you
Jedi
could.
Academy games
I thought
were.
you could go back and forth between the two of them.
Oh, maybe it's been a long time since I
Okay,
played.
because I remember like if you were meleeing, I didn't play it much, but if he was like moving around, he'd be in first person mode, and then shooting people, he'd still be in first person mode. But as soon as he would be in melee with somebody to use a lightsaber, he would switch to third person mode by like pressing a button so that he could see where the lightsaber was going.
Yeah,
So, but a lot of like first person shooters at that time kind of allowed you to go into third person, like there on the PC anyway. There was quite a few of them that allowed you to go back and forth between the two of them.
yeah. If they had, especially if they had a melee option.
Yeah.
But like, I know we jumped around all over the place, but it's a genre that I've always been a big fan of.
Hmm.
You're getting like, I mean, Doom.
Hmm.
It's funny because it sort of goes full circle. Like that was original Doom was like
Yeah.
real visceral experience,
Hmm.
and then this new Doom.
Hmm.
Like, not to say that Doom 3 was bad. Doom 3 was great. It
Yeah.
was a real creepy story driven experience.
That everybody
And
just played on low settings.
well, yeah. But again, like I remember playing that game and having to make a decision
Hmm.
between being able to see what's going on and having a weapon out. And I'm like, I'm just gonna it was one of those multiplayer games that like when you were playing through it co-op,
Hmm.
it was like Crystal Chronicles.
Okay.
You always had to have that one person that was going to carry the cup or hold the flashlight.
Oh,
You
okay.
just didn't want it to be you.
Right.
But they were necessary.
Yeah. Kind of
So,
like the defib packs in Left 4 Dead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone's got to have it,
Yeah.
but you don't want that to be you. But again,
or
like that's another
or you do.
I'm not going to get
Yeah.
too off base again, but that's another amazing like
Yeah, I
these
really
these
liked Left 4
four-player
Dead.
experiences
Yeah.
where you're doing something like the Left 4 Dead games. There was also Evolve,
Hmm.
which I mean failed miserably, but was a wonderful experience to play at the time.
Hmm.
The four humans against one giant monster.
Yeah.
Giant monster was so much fun to play.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've only played I haven't played Evolve, but I played Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 with a bunch of people.
Yeah, it was super fun, and it even had like being able to play as one of the zombies
Hmm.
was really fun as well. Like,
Yeah, that was entertaining because you
yeah,
die and you could, yeah.
you just fuck with people.
Yeah, that was always fun.
But yeah, we want to hear about what you like. Are
Yeah.
you guys more fighting game fans or shooter fans?
Hmm.
What
Probably shooter fans.
maybe. What do you like out of your first person shooters?
Yeah, and if you know of any first person shooters with good campaigns that are longer than 10 hours, put them in the comments down below.
Because JC wants to play them.
Yes. Yes. And don't list RPGs like Oblivion and like Skyrim because I've already freaking played those.
And they're not necessarily shooters. I mean,
Yeah.
they're kind of
Yeah. Talking about real, like World War II, like Vietnam, Afghan War campaigns.
I'm telling you.
That's longer than 4 or 5 hours.
Call of Duty 4.
All right.
Sit down, give it a chance. There's a remastered version.
Is there?
Yeah, it's on the PS4. I think it might even be free.
All right.
So, give it a shot.
Yeah.
One of the best levels in video games.
Maybe I'll play it and we'll do a chat
L-
review about
let
it.
JC know that he needs to play this. And if you made it this far,
You're gonna make some of my friends comment to make me feel pain. Oh, I'm gonna hate playing that.
it's really good though. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Yeah.
But again, if you made it this far, feel free to give us a like.
Mm-hmm.
Subscribe if you'd like to see new content from us.
Yep.
And we will see you next Wednesday. Like, I'm really excited to see what they do with like
Dragon Age.
I totally blanked.